Hello, I'm Alexander Moravian. I'm the man who's making this place. And when it's all finished and done properly, I'm going to re-record these films, using a better camera, for one thing. And I'll probably try and weave some kind of story into the films as well. I don't know, I haven't decided yet. Anyway, for the moment, these are just placeholder films. But they do contain important information that you need to get through the building. So they're worth watching. Thank you. So, we meet again. Congratulations, you've managed to wire the fuel cell up to itself. The thing you can see flowing through the wires is called charge. You may be wondering what this place is. Well, terminals only let you wire up things in an area that's close to them. When you're wiring things up, you'll see this area turn a little bit orange. It means that to get across this room, you're going to need to use more than one terminal. The school, well, when it was a normal school, it ran for about 5 years, I think. But then Melissa as you've probably gathered by now, You can't wire up a machine with just one wire. You need the charge to flow into the machine through one wire and then out again and back to the fuel cell via a different wire. Now when you do this, this is called a circuit, and the charge can flow round and round the circuit, powering the machine. It's getting late.